So I think we should start. Shabir, आपने हमें बताना है तो हम इसको फिर start करते हैं. Almost 6 तो बज गए हैं. So I think we will be starting. I will shift to English, and we will start in, I would say, in another minute. I'm just waiting for the go-ahead from our technical manager and coordinator right now, who is Mr. Ghulam Shabir, and he is looking after the technical aspects of this live broadcast on Zoom and on Facebook. And I would like to thank the Facebook friends and followers of YFK, also on my page and some other pages as well, and who are joining us right now. So we will be starting now in a few minutes. Mr. Shabir, if you can give me, is there a way that you can give me the go ahead?
सर आप स्टार्ट कर सकते हैं और जो हमें फेसबुक पे देखना चाहते हैं तो वो फेसबुक पे भी हम लाइव जा रहे हैं.
हम जा रहे हैं live, ठीक है. Thank you very much. So we begin this session. Welcome to everyone who's joining us on Facebook and people who are joining us from Twitter, from inside Pakistan, from Kashmir, and from all over the world. This is a very important subject. Kashmir, for the last few weeks, actually has been in the news. It has been in the news for the past 4 years, specifically. But the context, of course, today we're discussing this topic in the context of the 4th anniversary of the extrajudicial killing and murder of Burhan Wani, a 21 or 22-year-old social media activist who, at the very end of his very short career, I mean, he's a young man and he died quite early, but in this very short life of 21 or 22 years, there's a very short period where he actually picked up the gun and was forced to reach a conclusion that he can't work peacefully for his cause, and that he has to pick up the gun and he has to join some of the armed resistance groups that are active in Kashmir. But mainly, this was an educated, smart, handsome young man who had a great future ahead of him. But finally, he lost hope in a peaceful resolution to the problem that faces millions of Kashmiris, and he picked up the gun. And that's what actually gave or provided, gave an excuse to the Indian military occupation administration in Kashmir to finally pinpoint his location, find him, and eliminate him right on the spot. So when I say this was an extrajudicial, when we talk to some of our friends in India, especially those in the Indian government, their narrative is very simple. This was a terrorist. This was somebody who was carrying a gun, and he was killed on the spot because he was armed. But the fact of the matter is, and many of the human rights lawyers all over the world, including in India, realized that this was an extrajudicial killing. It was a murder. This was a person who was entitled to be arrested, to be arraigned, to have his day in the court, and for the facts to be put in front of the public as to whether he was really a militant, a terrorist, as the government of India says, or if he were what many of us believe here, that he was actually a social media activist, a young man, a college student, a university student who had a great future ahead of him, and he lost hope in the peaceful resolution of the conflict, and he was pushed to the wall and went to the mountains and joined a militant group. So we'll talk about this. I'm very happy to be joined here with Mr. Irshad Mahmood. He's a very, very well-known Kashmiri journalist. We follow his writings. He's also the executive director of the Center for Development, for Reform, for Policy and Reforms. And he's been, in fact, he's one of the few people, frankly, in this region and worldwide who have a very good grip really as to what's happening in Kashmir. I will take a few minutes initially where I will just
Sure.
talk about Burhan Wani. But after I finish, I would like to, frankly, the reason I'm here, and I'm sure many of you are here, is to listen to what Mr. Irshad Mahmood Saab actually is going to tell us about where this conflict actually is going 4 years down the road after the brutal extrajudicial murder and elimination of Burhan Wani. Of course, we are mentioning him repeatedly because it was this simple act of sacrifice, this incident, this extrajudicial killing that actually gave an impetus to the freedom struggle and movement in Kashmir for the right of self-determination to sort of be reborn on the international stage. So I will talk about Burhan Wani first, and then we'll listen to Mr. Irshad Mahmood, a Kashmiri, a journalist, somebody who's been working on Kashmir, and we'll listen to him explain where this conflict is going, with, of course, with reference to what's happening now down the road 4 years later after Burhan Wani, and also with reference to the UN Security Council's interest now, the renewed interest of the international community of major powers, including China, including the United States, including many others, their interest and the United Nations interest also in Kashmir. So Mr. Irshad Mahmood, thank you very much for being here. We look forward to listening to what you have to say really about where this conflict is going. Allow me, in addition to the couple of minutes that I've taken right now, being the moderator, in addition to that, let me just take 2 or 3 minutes more and just address a couple of points before I give you the floor. Basically, I would like to just address 3 points. Number one, which is a very important point, and a lot of people actually miss this point, whether in Pakistan, whether in Kashmir, or whether internationally. Many of our friends ask me, and a lot of us actually ask each other, where is this thing going? Because it's been going on for 7 decades. We're discussing Burhan Wani right now. It's been 4 years. So where are we going with this? So let me just say this, just get it out. And I'd like to, and I ensure that I say this everywhere I go whenever I'm talking about Kashmir. Kashmir conflict has entered, I think, what appears to be the last stage, the last stages of the resolution of this conflict. How it is resolved, what shape this conflict resolution takes is something that probably many of us cannot address right now because it's not clear. We don't know how it will be addressed. But the great thing is that after 50 or 60 years of sort of global negligence for this conflict, the world all of a sudden is talking about Kashmir. And it's a matter of great satisfaction to many Kashmiris, to many human rights defenders, to many of the journalists who are following this conflict, that after a long, long time, many, many years, we're actually seeing the international media take interest in this conflict. So this is a major development. Another major development is that the United Nations has ended its silence on Kashmir. For about 50 years, 5 decades, the UN went silent after it passed several resolutions at the UN Security Council on Kashmir, one of them, of course, calling for a referendum for the Kashmiris to decide their future. The UN went silent, and it stayed silent for about 5 decades. But all of a sudden, and again, thanks to this young Kashmiri man, Burhan Wani, all of a sudden, Kashmir is back on the international stage. Burhan Wani was eliminated, extrajudicially killed by the Indian Army in July of the year 2016. So it's exactly to the day, it's exactly 4 years. And just, I think, about 2 months after the extrajudicial murder of Wani, the United Nations ended its 50-year silence on Kashmir. And in September 2016, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, at that time it was Prince Zeid Ra'ad al-Hussein. Prince Zeid Ra'ad al-Hussein, as the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, broke, symbolically, broke the 5-decade-old silence of the UN and brought Kashmir to the top of the UN agenda. So that happened. Burhan was killed in July 2016, and in September, the UN broke its silence on Kashmir. Recently, of course, we've seen the British Parliament, we've seen the US Congress, we've seen the French Parliament, we've seen the European Parliament, we've seen members of all of these legislatures. We've seen the US President offer at least 3 or 4 times offer American mediation in this conflict, which is significant, by the way. A lot of the people say, well, what does it matter if the US President offered mediation? He's not following it up with pressuring both parties, India and Pakistan, to accept or agree to a referendum. And I often say, I agree. It's very slow. We'd like to see it. We would like to see some action on this mediation. But the very fact that after, again, several decades, a US president, being, of course, a major power, the superpower, frankly, one of the most powerful countries in the world, a P5 country, obviously, the US president offering his mediation signifies one very key thing, that Kashmir conflict is not a bilateral matter between 2 countries, and it is not an internal matter of one country, which is India. And that is the Indian official position, that this is an internal matter. No country in the world should be discussing or talking about Kashmir. So when you have the US president offering mediation, he's basically saying, wait a second, I'm sorry, this is not an internal matter of any country. This is an international dispute. It's an international conflict. And a P5 country like the US, or maybe later Russia or China or Britain or France, can offer mediation because it is an international dispute. And then we've seen the UN Security Council discuss Kashmir at least twice. In fact, they came close to discussing it again for a 3rd time recently, a few days ago. So the UN Security Council, again, when it discusses Kashmir, it means that this is not an internal matter of India. This is not an internal dispute. This is not a bilateral matter. This is an international conflict. So all of this, I'm listing these things right now very quickly, just to tell you that thanks to this event, I would say, the sacrifice by this young Kashmiri who began his life, a young, handsome man from a good family, had a good future, could have gotten really excellent education, could have traveled to a foreign university, could have returned back. In fact, he was so good looking, I heard people actually suggested to him he could go and join the fashion industry, he could join the film industry, but he chose actually to be preoccupied by the suffering of his people. And right now, let's be very frank, and let me just mention this as well, that Kashmiris right now, we have lockdowns all over the world, but the Kashmiris now are enduring the world's longest lockdown in history, both in terms of physical movement and also in terms of communication. They have an internet lockdown. In fact, Kashmir is one of the few places in the world right now where people do not have the luxury. It's not a luxury, it's really a necessity, but they do not have the right to access high-speed internet. They are forced to continue using 2G internet, very slow. People are suffering, education is suffering, hospitals are suffering. The life that really has come to a stop. So Burhan Wani today, when we sit and when we discuss the situation right now in Kashmir, and the context is this 4th anniversary of the extrajudicial killing of this young man, it is because this person deserves to be remembered. And I have many friends in India, by the way, and we have journalists and we have human rights defenders, we have lawyers, we have people who have been in government in the past. Now they're in public policy, maybe institutes, think tanks, and writing in the media. And often we discuss Burhan Wani, and they say, you know, Ahmed, Burhan Wani is a terrorist. He picked up an arm. You can Google his pictures in military fatigues, carrying AK-47s. So he is a terrorist. I'm not sure I have any evidence that he actually participated in violence. I know that he was urging people to pick up arms and take the route of armed resistance because he lost hope in a peaceful resolution, mainly because the government of India refuses to engage the Kashmiri people and engage Pakistan and the international community in a peaceful resolution to this 7-decade-old conflict. But but the fact is that this young man actually could have chosen a different path in life. It is because of the intransigence of this big country, India, which can very easily expend its political capital. You know, big countries have a luxury that smaller countries do not have. Big countries can do something about conflicts, especially when they're surrounded by smaller countries all around them. And they face really no existential threat from any neighbor. And India is one of those countries. India is so huge, so large, so big that it does not face, frankly, threat from anyone, any neighbor around it, because every neighbor of India is much, much slower. The strongest neighbor among the small neighbors that India has is Pakistan. And Pakistan is about 5 to 6 times smaller than India. And no country wants to harm India. No country wants to dismember or break up India. For Pakistan, for example, when we speak to Pakistani officials, they tell us, we would like to have the best of relationship with India. We'd like to have trade. We'd like to have people-to-people exchanges. We'd like to have everything that neighboring countries have. But Kashmir has to be resolved. It is not possible for Pakistani governments and for Pakistani public opinion to do trade, do business, do cultural exchanges with India, knowing that millions of Kashmiris are extrajudicially killed, put behind bars, and basic rights are denied to them. So this has to be resolved. India can do it. We hope that good sense will prevail in New Delhi, specifically now when after the border skirmishes between China and India have sort of allowed in China now to enter this battle space, Kashmir, which is now sort of a battle space between 3 major powers, India, China, and Pakistan. It is even more imperative now for the Indian officials to frankly come to the final resolution of this conflict. And it is coming. This conflict will be resolved, whether India likes it or not, whether Pakistan likes it or not, whether anyone likes it or not. Why? Were and what said struggle, demand for the now the UN is stepping forward, India is stepping forward.
Mm-hmm. My God.
We can indulge and engage each other in question and answer. We have 15 minutes to go to listen to Mr. Irshad Mahmood, and after that,
Krisha, I can't hear you. Oh, no, it's okay. Hello.
yes, we can hear you, Irshad.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ahmed Qureshi sir, for inviting me, and also thank you your team YKF Youth for Kashmir. Uh, Kashmir is very close to my heart, and for everybody's almost all of the entire Pakistan loves Kashmir. So all time most of my life we have been talking about the Kashmir and Kashmiri struggles. We know that Kashmir has witnessed many ups and downs in its Chakwer history. 72 years long Chakwer history. But the killing of Burhan Wani is considered one of the major watershed movement in the history of Kashmir. It dramatically changed the dynamics of Kashmir and socio-political life of Kashmiris and even Kashmir conflict. In my view, it established four key facts, which were normally were overlooked by the international community and largely the whole world. Number one, Kashmir is indigenous problem. Kashmir struggle is a popular mass movement of Kashmir, entrenched in the quest for freedom, for the right of self-determination, civil liberties, and human dignity. Second fact, which was established after Boran Wani's killing, is particularly that the way youth of Kashmir came out from their comfort zones and ran the protest was unprecedented. In fact, the youth has taken charge of Kashmir struggle and providing leadership since then. You might had that one of the India's ex-external affairs minister, Yashwant Sinha, has been to Kashmir more than 5-6 times after the Burwani's killings, and he has published wonderful reports about the ground situation in Kashmir. So in one of his reports, he says that the young Kashmiris have lost their fear. This is because of the Burhan Wani's struggles and his sacrifice, supreme sacrifice in 2000, July 2015. As Ahmed Qureshi Saab stated earlier, that the Kashmir gained its due space in the international discourse, which was not the case before. The world bodies such as United Nations Human Rights Council issued 2 reports on Kashmir. So these 2 reports, I'm very glad when I read these reports. Both reports reiterated once again the Kashmiri's right of self-determination. So almost some people say that after 44 years and Kashmir situation. Fourth fact is that, which is very important, that it has been explicitly made clear to the world that the status quo is not acceptable to the people of Kashmir, and nor it offers any solution to the problem. Now, let me talk about the post-5th August scenario. In fact, the situation was very fragile after the Burhan Wani killings, but India put oil on the fire by abrogating the Article 370 and 35A on August 5th, which has further complicated already fragile situation in Kashmir. Kashmiri, particularly the citizens of the Kashmir Valley, cutting across the political divide, felt betrayed and humiliated by this action. Uh, these actions considered as existential threat, which compel people of Kashmir across the political divide to pitch strong resistance. Resistance became a compulsion as people felt their identity is in danger, but to talk about the political rights. So India, to contain the people's reaction of this is of is its action of 5th August, put whole of the Kashmir into an open prison. Kashmiri, as Qureshi Saab said, that witnessed history's longest ever curfew and longest ever e-curfew. In fact, there was a fear that if BJP succeeds in Kashmir, it further disempower the people of Kashmir. As we have been talking about the demographic change, installation of the Hindu chief minister in a Muslim state, these all are the ideas which are on the cards. So far, in my view, uh, India hasn't been able to get tangible support from the ground in Kashmir to validate the August 5th change. Even pro-Indian parties and non-Muslim dominated regions are also expressing dissenting voices, and they are demanding protection of the domicile law. If you see the current Indian position towards vis-a-vis Kashmir, we have seen from 5th August, particularly from 5th August, India has been doing fighting since it abrogated the Article 370. It has been trying to manage media, international media particularly, international public opinion, but it could not get through. We have seen so many articles in the international press, particularly the New York Times, Washington Post, Al Jazeera, Press TV, so many other international newspapers. Even I was someone to send me a clipping of articles from the Japan, which was published in Japanese language. Couple of months back, I went to the Oslo, so, whereby my friends and colleagues told me that every week local television channels in Norwegian language, they telecast some documentaries or news or interviews about Kashmir. And similarly, the European press have been first time in the history have intensively cover Kashmir. So India have been largely not been able to manage international press. India's have forecast has flown undemocratic. It has globally isolated India. And I would like to quote Shiv Shankar Menon, who used to be India's High Commissioner to Security Advisor. A few weeks back, he stated that Modi's action has in fact globally isolated India. In this scenario, I would say that the iron fist approach, which was employed by the Indian state to contain Kashmir and to continue its occupation, yield no result so far. And as Ahmed Qureshi Saab has intensively, elaborately explained, the how Kashmir has become a part of the international agenda. Particularly, EU have been twice or thrice have mentioned, not only mentioned, but they have some sessions over Kashmir. Due to the COVID situation, unfortunately, the Kashmir campaign could not be, Kashmiri lobbyists and others, they didn't able to continue their struggle globally. But despite that, Kashmir is on the international radar. Kashmir has been discussed extensively in India itself. Another important issue is that despite the last 7-8 months, not 11 months, Kashmir is still unstable, and India hasn't been able to find any tangible support from the ground who can validate its action, support, provide political support. With these words, I would thank you very much for your attention, and that's it from me, Ahmed Qureshi Saab, for time being.
Thank you very much, Irshad Saab. You had 15 minutes and you finished it in 10 minutes. And this makes you a unique person in this region, because normally people take more than the time allotted to them, and you actually saved us 5 minutes.
Actually, 15 minutes is too much. 10 minutes is enough for any speaker.
It is. I was really very inspired by a few things that you said. You made a very interesting observation, Mr. Irshad, when you said, and very rightly so, you said, when you observed that India has been actually mostly doing firefighting work in Kashmir and internationally in defense of its actions. And yet it's unable to find support within Kashmir, any tangible support within Kashmir, or internationally from the international community. And this is a very, this is a great observation, because a lot of people forget, people who are following what's happening in Kashmir and India and China and India and Pakistan, people forget this key fact that you observed right now, that number one, there is no tangible support from within Kashmir to the actions taken by the government of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the annexation, the constitutional changes. And number two, there's also not a single country worldwide that has accepted what India has done. So no country actually has, although India has good relationship, really very excellent relationships with many countries, but no country has actually stepped forward to say, yes, we completely support your annexation of Kashmir. No single country wants to do that, despite having many interests, in the relationship with India. So this is a very key thing that you mentioned, Mr. Rashad, among other things, that the picture that you painted. I see some questions here. There were lots of people actually who had questions, and I think I have a button here. I'm using this app actually, frankly, for the first time. I have a question here from an anonymous attendee, and his question actually is too late now. He's asking, when will the meeting start? So that thing that's been answered.
Meeting has been already started.
Started. There's another person who's asking, who's basically making a comment. He's saying, Kashmir hamara hai aur rahega. Kashmir is ours and will be ours. I think it's a Kashmiri gentleman, and of course that's what he's saying, and these are the Kashmiri sentiments. I think there's another question, Irshad Saab. Any question that I see here that is relevant, I'm going to pass it on to you, Irshad Saab. There's a question here. Why Kashmir? This is from Aqsa Abdul Qadir. And Aqsa Abdul Qadir is asking this question: why Kashmir is an international issue, and how is it an issue for the whole world? So this is a very interesting question by Aqsa Abdul Qadir. She did not really ask or specify whom she's asking. So Mr. Rashad, I think you can take this question, and I'll give my opinion later. But this is a very good question. Why is Kashmir an international issue? So this is a very legitimate question. This is actually the position of India. India says this is not an international issue, and it is not an issue for the whole world. It is just an issue of India and maybe Pakistan, and that's it. So how do you answer the question, Mr. Rashad? Why Kashmir is an international issue, and how is it the issue for the whole world? Aqsa Abdul Qadir.
It's a international issue because India has taken this issue to the United Nations Security Council, and we all know that the United Nations Security Council have passed many resolutions, almost 20 resolutions we have seen so far, which was passed in the United Nations resolutions. Some of them, particularly the initial resolutions, they clearly say that the Kashmir issue will be settled by the United Nations by holding a plebiscite in Kashmir. So India has taken theirs, Pakistan accepted this position, Kashmir is accepted these positions, and interestingly, hardly people know that United Nations, even when they imposed a ceasefire, when they announced they made India and Pakistan to announce ceasefire in 1st January 1947. They brought their observers to the line of control, and we have on both sides of line of control the United Nations observers are stations. We have offices in Muzaffarabad, Srinagar, Islamabad, and New Delhi, who monitors line of control. 700 long line of control. They are regularly monitoring that line of control. Secondly, it is the issue of right of self-determination and occupation, human rights, civil liberties. So these all are the values which is very close to the international community, and in fact, particularly the democracies and the Western democracies, they are driven by these values. So that's why it is also. Krishna, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So, and another aspect is that the Pakistan and India is a nuclear power, and Kashmir is boiling since 1990. Kashmiris are asking, you might be aware, Kurushi Saab, that in early 1990, Human Rights Watch reported that when India didn't impose the restrictions, massive restrictions on the people's movement, more than Human Rights Watch report, Kashmir Sea under siege reports that more than half of the Srinagar turned to the United Nations United Nations observers offices in stations in Srinagar and asked them to resolve this problem. Um, both countries are nuclear. Kashmir is boiling, and particularly after Palwama, we are in a state of war. In fact, you can say that not a day passes when Indian forces are not firing on the innocent people of Azad Jammu and Kashmir. So you can see that almost if you go to the line of control, you will feel that we are not living in a normal environment, circumstances. Um, Huge number of people have been hit by this crossfire. So all these points deserve international intervention and support for the Kashmiris.
Great, excellent answer. And I have another question from Aqsa Abdul Qadir. She asks another very pertinent question. She says, why people glamorize the death of Burhan Wani? Why don't we see the other side of the story? The armor and weapons have increased so much in Kashmir that people now think that weapons can give them independence. Isn't it the major loss of Kashmir as people have stopped studying? Let me answer this question, and the question, the question of the other, why people glamorize Burhan Wani. First of all, let's be very, very quick, very, very clear about one thing. Kashmiris don't want to die. Kashmiris want to live. Kashmiris want to have a great future. If we see somebody like Burhan Wani, who had a great future ahead of him, but was forced actually to pick up arms and choose the path of armed resistance, it is because he was pushed to the wall. So Kashmiris really don't want to pick up arms. They don't want to fight. They want to live, but they are being pushed to the wall. So the quick answer, I'm not going to take much time really answering this question. The quick answer is this, that the Kashmiris have been pushed to the wall. You have about 10, 12, or 15 million people who are facing the second or third largest army by size in the world, fully armed. It can't fight properly Pakistan, as we saw last year when the dogfight over Kashmir skies happened and Pakistan downed an Indian jet and captured its pilot. This Indian army cannot fight properly China, and we've seen that recently in the last few days and weeks. But it has all this huge army really positioned to fight Kashmiris. So these Kashmiris have been pushed to the wall, and sometimes, unfortunately, some of the Kashmiris pick up arms and go for the path of armed resistance. So, and I don't think I can blame the Kashmiris for that if some Kashmiri does that. I don't want to glamorize militancy, for example. But I will glamorize Burhan Wani, not because he picked up a weapon or an arm. I will glamorize Burhan Wani because he chose to stand with his people. He chose sacrifice. He did not go and hurt civilians or kill people. He just chose the path of passive resistance through social media. Of course, the Indian government says he picked up arms. I have no evidence, really, as a journalist, as a scholar, I have not seen any evidence that he actually indulged in armed conflict. He was mostly sort of trying to entice and encourage people like him, young Kashmiris, really to go for armed resistance if India refuses to resolve the conflict. Would you like to say something to this, Irshad Sahab, or should I move to the next question?
Yes. I would like to say a couple of things. Actually, when government doesn't allow peaceful movement, then normally we have seen all over the world that young people, they move to pick up the I mean they actually, they have no option to besides the picking up the gun. So I, as Ahmed Qureshi Saab say, we hate violence. I hate violence, but problem is that you have seen that the even political leaders after August 5th, before 5th August, we have seen that entire political class have been put in behind the bar in Kashmir. Yasin Malik, who have renounced violence in 1994 and become a political activist and leader, he says that more than 200 his colleagues have been killed despite his denouncing violence and starting a peaceful life. He have been jailed, and we have seen that this case is India has put on speedy trial. So almost they have once again um, brought forth some cases which were started in 1990. Similarly, we have seen that the Srinagar High Court Bar Association Sadar, where President Mia Abdul Qayyum is still in the jail. He's a lawyer, activist. He has never picked up any gun or never done any violence in Kashmir. So many other Kashmiris, trade leaders, business leaders, lawyers, civil society. And recently we have seen that even journalists, spaces for the journalists are constantly shrinking in Kashmir. Leading journalists have faced threats, and they were summoned to the police stations. So this is the
And we have, and
overall
let's remember,
environment, which
and
is very,
Mr.
very, very
Rashad, let's also remember,
sophisticated.
yes, and let's remember Shujat Bukhari here, a
Exactly.
very well-known Kashmiri journalist who was unfortunately assassinated in Kashmir, and it was one of the major incidents and major examples of how, as Mr. Rashad Mahmood Saab said, that the space is shrinking now. For let me just take a few more questions. I have Aisha Jamshed, Zaman Bajwa, I have Asma Jamshed, and I think Zaman Bajwa would like to ask this question through video. So if Mr. Ghulam Shabir can put Mr. Zaman Bajwa on video, is this possible, or should I just read his question? So Mr. Shabir, can we put Mr. Zaman Bajwa on video, or should we just?
सर जमान साहब का माइक जो है वो एक्टिव नहीं है ऑडियो
No. Okay, great. So Zaman, if you can put your question here, I will read it. Let me move on to the next question by Aisha Jamshed, and her question is again very interesting. She's saying, if Kashmir gets freedom, and as an individual country, if it becomes a country, then will Pakistan treat it the same way as we are doing right now? Because we have two nuclear armed countries here in this region, India and Pakistan and so forth. So if I understood correctly, she's asking, if Kashmir gets freedom as an independent or individual country, then will Pakistan treat it the same way as we are treating it right now? I think since this is a very hypothetical question, well, let's not go in deep into it. But I'd like to say one sentence, and I'd like to hear also Mr. Irshad if he wants to say something about it. And my sentence is this: I think we should not move ahead of us. Right now, we have UN Security Council resolutions that devise or give a solution for this conflict, which is a referendum. And this referendum is for Kashmiris to choose between Pakistan and India. Let's get to the referendum, and if then the Kashmiris would like to make changes in the options, have a third option, have a fourth option, a fifth option. So this might or can be discussed when the time comes. I think it's a waste of time to discuss hypotheticals right now. So it's a good question. We can hypothesize about it and give scenarios, but I think it's a waste of time to discuss it. That's my opinion. But Mr. Rashad, if you have something to say on this.
I fully agree with you, because when it will come, we will see how to deal with these questions. But so far, the India is not even willing to engage Pakistan in a dialogue. They have slashed the 50% staff from the Pakistani High Commission in New Delhi, and we are in a very difficult stage, and in fact very, very difficult time. As you said, that the Kashmir has entered into its defining very crucial time. So we should focus on present moment to strengthen this moment and try to get out of the present mess and situation. and to have a better future.
Great.
Sir, Zaman's mic is unmuted now.
Unmuted. So, Mr. Zaman, if you'd like to ask the question directly, you're most welcome.
I want to ask for Mr. Once again in hot news due to the situation in Ladakh. So how we can get benefit from this situation and we can highlight the attitude and the intentions of India. So what are your suggestions for the peace groups and government of Pakistan?
It's for you, Mr. Rashad.
Okay, thank you, Zubair Bajwa Sahab. In fact, India and China, they have been dispute over the borders line of actual control since very long, and it has not directly connected with the Kashmir, but due to the India's abrogation of Article 370, that created a new situation, and China has mentioned this again and again, and we have seen that the first time China has supported us in United Nations Security Council, and we went there twice or thrice with the help of the China. We raised the Kashmir there with the help of China. So previously, China have been advising us, Kashmiris, Pakistanis, government of Pakistanis, to lay low and reduce the escalation between India and Pakistan, more focus on trade and business and other things. But recently, Chinese have changed their positions, which is largely in our favor. We appreciate it. As far as Ladakh is concerned, India and China both have been saying that this is our land, and you might be aware that some chunk of the Excise Chan is under the Chinese control, which is India claims that is the part of Jammu and Kashmir state. So we are observing this crisis, and largely I think that the China is a very responsible nation, and we have seen that they conducted this crisis very peacefully so far. And whatever I saw in the newspapers, that they might be able to de-escalate. They have already de-escalated the situation. They are maybe gradually they might go back to their original positions. We don't know what will be the future of this conflict. So we should not be hope, or we should not read too much in between the lines. We will see how it unfolds in future.
Great, thank you, Mr.
Rashad. But it's as a whole, it's created a lot of pressure on India, and Modi's myth that he's the Iron Man of the India has shattered badly. And secondly, no, the Indian media and the opposition parties, they picked up the courage to criticize Modi, challenge him, oppose him publicly. And his credential has been quite become quite fragile during last few weeks, because he could not challenge China publicly. Even you might know that when he went to the Ladakh, he didn't mention even China's aggression. And in one of the all parties conference, no, not one, in the all parties conference, he said that China hasn't occupied an inch of the Indian land. So the people have raised questions. So why the 20 Chinese Indian soldiers was killed? Who killed them? If China hasn't occupy an inch of the land, Indian land.
Great, thank you, Mr. Rashad. I have some remarks, I assume by some of our friends from India here, but these are not questions, these are rhetorical remarks. So I think I will just pass them, because it's no point really discussing them. I have a question here from an anonymous attendee, and the question is, well, it's again, how can an army of a democratic country kill people? That's one question. And some other rhetorical remarks. Again, I'm assuming from our friends in India. I'd like to say one thing, Mr. Rashad. You mentioned about India, you of course praised China's role in the UN Security Council recently, and how the UN Security Council discussed twice in the past few months discussed Kashmir, thanks to China raising it. And this is a fact that China did this, and in Pakistan and Kashmiris are extremely grateful for this Chinese position. I would like to also praise the role of the rest of the P5 countries, United States, the UK, France, Russia. Why? Because the rest of the four countries in the UN security, the P5 countries, none of them, all of them actually, or any one of them actually, could have objected to the discussion on Kashmir, despite the fact that China tabled a request to discuss Kashmir. The UK or France or the US or Russia could have vetoed that request, and the discussion could have been scuttled. But uniquely and amazingly, and this is a very, very important observation, none of the P5 countries, China tables the request to discuss Kashmir, and the rest of the four, Russia, the US, UK, France, none of them object or veto the Chinese request, despite the Indian diplomacy and despite appeals and beseeching. And I'm sure the Indians pulled every diplomatic trick in the book to convince at least maybe the UK or France or even Russia or the US to veto, and none of them did. So China requested a discussion at the UN Security Council in Kashmir twice, and the rest of the P4 countries, none of them vetoes, which frankly, even I spoke to some Pakistani diplomats, Pakistani government officials, and initially they said, they thought maybe one of the Western countries might object, or maybe Russia would object because of their relationships with India, the trade, the arms agreements. Surprisingly, none of the P5 countries objected. So this is again another example of how the international community has changed its position on Kashmir, and everybody's actually seized of the matter. So this is a major change and development. I have some other questions here, and okay, I have one question again from Ms. Aqsa Abdul Qadir, and her question is: Will China's involvement solve the problem of Kashmir, and how will it benefit Pakistan? This is a very good question. Will China's involvement solve the problem of Kashmir, and how will it benefit? The second part of the question is also very key. How will it benefit Pakistan? So why don't you start, Mr. Rashad, and I have also some remarks on it, but I'll take them later. You begin. Will China's involvement solve the Kashmir conflict, and how will it benefit Pakistan? Mr. Rashad, are you with me?
Yeah, yes. Thank you. My opinion is slightly different, although China is very close to us, and China is one of the major power, and definitely it's a emerging power, and US is known as a declining power. Despite that, Kashmir needs support from Western world as well, because they control United Nations and other international institutions. Kashmir is issue of right of self-determination, democracy, human rights, and all these things, which has been, and which is very dear to the Western countries and values and societies. So we also need their support, but at the same time being practical, pragmatic. I understand that they haven't supported Kashmir wholeheartedly so far, particularly in last 30 years. Their attitude towards Kashmir have been quite, you can say, largely unsympathetic. And if something happens of this scale in other part of the world, even in China, even in Iran, even in any other country, they might have attacked that country. But whatever have happened in Kashmir, they have seen it, observe it, and absorb it. They have preferred trade over human rights, human values. So I mean, largely we are unhappy with Western democracies, because we were expecting their more and more support, vibrant support. As far as China is concerned, China is our, all-weather friend. China has supported us, and recently, particularly the United Nations Security Council, China took the initiative. So we are thankful to China. So China, whatever China is doing is generally we consider it's in the interest of Pakistan. Um, Particularly the India have, if you see the during last 1 years, Pakistan went through a very difficult time because India have moved, use maximum missiles against Pakistan. So the China open up the Ladakh front. I don't know, it's a coordinated effort or it's isolated event, but whatever happened, it's detract Indian attention towards Pakistan, and especially discredit the Modi inside India as well, and globally also. The entire world has seen that the Modi has no guts to challenge China. They can only bully small countries, small neighbors, and they are not willing to give the tough time to the big powers, and particularly the China.
That's very great. Of course, this is a huge discussion. The question that Ms. Aqsa asked, we can have a whole session and a webinar just to answer this question. So, but just to conclude, just to add to what Mr. Irshad just said about whether China's involvement could actually resolve Kashmir conflict and whether it will be beneficial for Pakistan. You mentioned something, Mr. Irshad. You said that China is a rising power, but the US is a declining power. And I was of the view that the US indeed is a declining power up until the Obama administration. And with Trump and the way he reasserted the American power on the international stage, although he is pulling out from many international organizations and treaties, and recently, of course, just yesterday, he pulled out from the World Health Organization. But despite that, I see the US actually reasserting its supremacy, although it's pulling out from many things, but it's also reasserting its supremacy in many other things as well, in trade and in other areas, in the Gulf, for example, in the Middle East. So I'm of the view that if the policy that President Trump has initiated, if it continues beyond him, if he's not a one-term president, if he wins a second term in November, and he continues for another 4 years, and maybe the president that comes after him continues similar policies, the US reasserting itself, then I would say that the decline of the US has been checked or stopped, and then we'll have the US and we'll have China. So I think we need to also realize that although the US has been, as you said very correctly, a declining power for much of the past 15 years or 17 or 18 years, we're seeing some signs of the US trying to reassert itself. Now, what does that mean for Kashmir? I have no doubt, and there's no question, that China has a key role to play in Kashmir conflict resolution. It is in one way a party to the conflict, although not in the UN Security Council resolutions directly, but it has become indirectly now a party because of Aksai Chin. It has become now a party, of course, because of the Ladakh. So these two things have now made de facto China has become a party, although not in the UN Security Council, but let's see how that plays out. There are many scenarios for that. China's role is important, but China's role by itself will not be enough, in my view, to resolve the Kashmir conflict. And as Mr. Irshad very rightly said, we need the support of important and influential blocs in the world for the resolution of Kashmir conflict. Let's not forget that even the right to for a referendum in Indian-occupied Kashmir, in the historical state of Jammu and Kashmir, this right was only possible, I mean, the passing of the resolution in the UN Security Council, because we had the support of Russia, China, and also the Western Bloc. So these three blocs are definitely essential for any conflict resolution. We need to have China on our side. We need to have Russia on board, and we need to have the key Western powers on board, specifically, of course, the United States, but also the UK and France, and possibly, of course, also Germany and the other emerging countries in the EU. So I think China is key. China's support is essential for Pakistan, but again, we have limitations. For example, in the border dispute right now between China and Pakistan, between China and India, Pakistan did not intervene. I mean, this is a key thing. Pakistan did not intervene or do anything diplomatically or on the ground militarily to sort of tip the scales on the ground. Pakistan stepped back, and Pakistan let India and China handle their issues bilaterally. And Pakistan could have played the role of a spoiler. Pakistan could have engaged India, for example, knowing that India is distracted, could have done something on the ceasefire line in Kashmir, could have done something diplomatically to hurt India, the way India has been doing to Pakistan over the last 2 decades, as Mr. Irshad just mentioned, diplomatically. But Pakistan didn't do that. So Pakistan stayed away, although Pakistan is fully politically and diplomatically supporting China's position with regards to the border dispute with India. But Pakistan actually did not actually do anything on the ground to tip the scales militarily or politically with regards to the recent India-China conflict. So there are limitations everywhere, everywhere for all the parties. China has a role, but there are limitations for the Chinese role. There are limitations for the American role. There are limitations for the Pakistani role. And I think it's only by all of these parties working together like they did when they passed the first resolution in the UN Security Council for the referendum all the way back 70 years ago. Only then maybe we can move this conflict forward. And let me conclude by saying this, that it is only when we saw the UN getting active again on Kashmir, when we saw the international community become active again on Kashmir, that finally this conflict started moving. And it was not enough just for Pakistan or just for China or just for X, Y, or Z to do anything. America alone, even if it wants, cannot resolve Kashmir without the involvement of the UN, without Pakistan, without Kashmir, or without China. And same thing for all the other parties. Do you have any last words, Mr. Irshad, before I conclude and I close?
Thank you. Discussion over Kashmir. We'll be in touch and we'll do again the same session.
Great, thank you very much. And I thank everybody who joined us. We'll have this video, of course, on YouTube and Facebook after this session. See you next time. Allah Hafiz.